You're watching TVC News. Of course, you just watched the broadcast of the President's speech live from the broadcast services of the NTA. Of course, everyone had to hook up. And it was quite an interesting speech. Of course, he had some points. He's talking about war against insecurity, economic growth, poverty reduction and jobs creation, sustaining democracy, women and youth, agriculture, and the call for constitutional reforms. Well, joining me in the studio is the executive editor of TVC News, Uzonna Ononye. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
The president talked about the war against insecurity. First of all, what is your take on this speech first?
I think it's a well thought out speech in the first place, and it touched on several areas that a lot of Nigerians have been bothered about. Whether or not it hit at the real issues is another discussion entirely, but it's holistic. It went round almost every aspect of the nation's existence.
Okay, so let's talk about insecurity now. He mentioned that despite the fact that the government has put in a lot in ensuring the fight against banditry and Boko Haram insurgency becomes successful, many people, like he mentioned in his speech, I'll read here, says, some Nigerians are taking undue advantage of a difficult situation and profiteering there from the misguided belief that adherence to democratic norms handicaps the administration. What's your take?
It's brilliant on paper, but why are some Nigerians taking advantage of government disposition to tackling insecurity? Why? Because government had not been very coming with expected solutions or actions towards ending whatever the challenge had been to the country from Boko Haram in the northeast, and it began to spread to almost every part of the north with in a different name now, bandits or banditry, and then several issues in the southern part of the country, particularly now that the southeast had become a kind of hotbed of insecurity. The government appear not to always have the right steps to take. I will give you a specific example.
Okay.
When there are bandits attacks in schools, the presidency explained that the government is handicapped in going after the bandits because of the fear of what the damage or the impact will be, having civilian casualties, people that are not supposed to be caught in the fire. Those excuses does not appear strong and firm,
but
convincing.
In the situation at that point, what would have been done?
There are so many things that would have been done. First is that there's what is called intelligence in management of security situation. I'm not an expert in that field, but the little understanding is that there are people who have the duty of knowing meaningfully what will happen even before it happens, so that there will be steps to protect or prevent whatever incident that may have occurred.
Well, have we not had intelligence reports over time? Did we take advantage of that? I'm
not in a very good position to comment on whether we have had or the agencies or authorities concerned have received intelligence report, because if they receive, I mean, it's classified information. Definitely. It wouldn't be made public. But the outcome in incidents and activities or whatever that is going on in the society would suggest that if there were reports, someone sat on them and didn't make use of them, or there may not have been reports. So any which way you look at it, it's not something that is commendable or should give pass mark to the people responsible of providing security of life and property for the entire citizenry. That's just a clear situation that we have. And so when it's seen in that manner, and then in another breath, some miscreants, I use that word carefully, decide to disturb the peace of the country in another part of the country, but for instance the southeast, they begin to threaten, they begin to carry out acts that are inimical to national development,
Okay.
And the president comes out firm, just like the president should be. You understand? And then the question now begins to come, why is it a case of selective, I'm trying to be careful with the word I use. Is it a case of selective docility or not understanding what the real issues are, that in one breath it is more of appeal? We have someone who visits the bandits in the forest and comes back with their demands, saying that they want amnesty, just like the Niger Delta militants were given amnesty in the past. He is known to everyone, and government, you know, manage it in a different way. And in another breath, somewhere else, something happens, and then government comes out, boom, just like the government. It's something that should be critically addressed to give a sense of equity and seriousness on the part of government in terms of managing insecurity. Let me make this last point on that before we move on. It has become a trade in that part of the country, Niger State, Zamfara State, Kaduna, where bandits carry out their acts and they wait to be paid.
Does not become an industry.
It's like a huge, huge industry. And that is why seeing an end to it is very difficult, because when it has become an economic venture, and I'm wondering who funds, or where the funds for this come from. It most likely won't come through the banks, because if it comes through the banks, it is easy. It will be easy to trace. Now, does it mean that people move around with millions of naira in cash in a cashless society? It creates a lot of questions that need to be answered. Where are the funds? Where are the money being exchanged or paid in ransom? Where does it come from? You know, and trying to trace this may actually help in finding an end to the situation there.
Okay, so let's talk about agriculture. And one of the high points is he talked about the Anchors Borrower program, which he said resulted in sharp decline in the nation's major food import bill from $2.23 billion in 2014 to $0.59 billion by the end of 2018.
Saying the truth, there's an action of this government that is very commendable. Very, very commendable. It may not sound civil. It may not be appreciated by people who are concerned about international policy and trade. That was when the government banned or closed the borders. Exactly. Closed the borders, you know, that period. It helped. Yes, foreign rice was still being imported. Foreign products were still being smuggled in, not imported.
How helpful was it? Because even local rice was almost at par with the price of foreign rice.
I beg your pardon. A lot of farmers began to trade.
Okay.
If you make inquiries, you discover that large-scale farmers even go to banks, borrow money to expand their production because they have seen a larger market. What led to the very high cost of local rice at that time is extreme demand. The demand was so high because the farmers cannot meet up with the demand.
Okay.
And then they began to produce, you know, in larger quantity. But the next question is, have we been able to
manage the gains?
Manage the gains very well and sustain that process to, you know, to full consumption, you know, by the people. I am not too sure about that. I'm not too sure about that, but we must have to give this government credit for trying to encourage local industry, particularly in agriculture. We still have cases of high percentage of wastage because the processing is not tidied up. Is a different industry, you know, in the agricultural value chain to process products to avoid wastage. Because if we don't cut off wastage or reduce wastage, farmers will do so much work, but before it will get to the consumer, it's damaged. They cannot be consumed anymore. So it will be a waste of time, resources, energy, and everything. So there's room for more to be done.
Infrastructural development plays a huge role
in agriculture.
Well,
yes, there's still room for a lot to be done in agriculture to improve the value that we derive from even the much we do yet. It is not yet, I mean, the practice of agriculture is not yet top there in terms of providing for local needs first. Processing, storage has to depend on power. And anybody who ventures into that industry today would make different arrangement instead of relying on the regular power supply that we have. If not, the business will not move.
Economic growth also depends on power.
A lot, quite a lot. There seems to be an improvement, but what we have is a case of one step forward, two steps backwards. Our generating capacity is still very low for a population of over 200 million people. Very, very low, very, very insignificant, for that matter. And then the cases of distribution and how the power distribution companies littered, excuse my choice of word, all over the country. Very inefficient, because I still wonder why some people are still not metered in Nigeria. I still wonder why, despite all the pronouncements by government.
There seem to be a lot of bottlenecks around that metering.
Why should that bottleneck exist? It's a huge, not exposing my own personal situation. I got my own meter. I got my own meter last year, September. And between September and now, I can tell you how relaxed I have been when it comes to power, for the fact that
manage your power.
I am not paying for what I am not consuming. I am not paying for what I am not consuming. When you have an appliance in the house that is not necessary, you can turn it off, and you're paying for exactly what you consume. So unlike where people are not metered, and then at the end of the month they receive outrageous bills that could actually send people packing to their villages.
Okay, so he talked about the call for constitutional reform, laying that call at the feet of the National Assembly.
That's true. It is the National Assembly that has the duty of constitutional reform.
Okay.
And unfortunately, for over 20 years that we've been in this democracy, since 1999, we've been, the civil society, the activists have been lamenting that we have a constitution that was imposed on the people by the military. And we have had series of amendments, but none had been able to hit the bull's eye of providing a constitution that will emanate from the people. Because the very strong element of the constitution that we have in Nigeria is that we, the people. And then the question is, who are the we? And that's the issues that the activists have been raising. But why has it been difficult to take a critical look at the Constitution of Nigeria in order to have that document that would appeal to every issues that concerns the country? Lawyers and legal minds always say that our constitution is very bogus, very voluminous, without still lacking in some of those elements. For instance, there are different peoples that make up Nigeria. Different peoples. And from time to time, particularly in a time like this, you will be hearing agitations of people that say they want to opt out of the federation. And in one hand, it is held that the unity of Nigeria
is not negotiable.
And so people keep stretching, saying that we want to opt out. There are countries of the world where it is constitutional that if you want to opt out, there are processes. Just like in Nigeria, it is constitutional. If you want to recall a senator or a member of the House of Representatives that you elected, there are processes. But let me let you know, since this return of democracy, it has not been activated successfully once. So there could be successfully, yes. There could be constitutional provisions for people that do not feel comfortable being part of Nigeria again. But let me tell you, if we have that constitutional provision, it will be difficult to see anybody that will go there.
Why do you think so?
Because the size of Nigeria is an advantage for everyone, provided there is justice, equity, and fairness.
But you think that way. A lot of these people are not thinking that way. They don't believe there's justice, fairness, and equity.
That, I said provided. That doesn't mean I agree that there's equity and fairness and justice. I'm saying that if there is equity in Nigeria, if there is fairness, if there is justice, I do not think that there is any part of this country that want to pull out. Because we are big enough to provide for ourselves. No part of this country, no part, I say again, no part of this country can develop alone without the other. So, because what A has, B doesn't have. And what A needs is what B has.
So by coming together, we can take advantage of every resources that we have.
Exactly. But the big condition, the big question is, under what condition fairness, equity, justice must be in place for people to be united or people to agree. So still talking about the Constitution, there are also certain things that should be, enshrined in the Constitution, so that it will become a constitutional violation if anybody goes contrary to it. Like today, there are 109 senators and 360 House of Rep members.
Are you calling for that to be pruned?
I'm not saying that. It's a constitutional matter. It's a constitutional matter. But the funny aspect of it is that I do not think I'm not going to sit down here and see how easy it will be for the members of that National Assembly to decide to reduce their numbers. It's going to be difficult.
But if the people call for it.
Yeah, they do. But how to get it done? How to get it done is a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge that will require extra effort. Instead of ordinary press conferences, instead of carrying placards on the streets, it will require extra effort of engagement and persuasion by those who feel strongly and firmly about it. Extra engagement through all aspects and all segments of the nation's structure to put pressure on the people that should look at it to say, okay, now we need to excuse me, we need to adjust in one way or the other.
Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about the last 1 year, 2020. You talked about COVID-19, the pandemic and all. How have we done so far with the pandemic and managing the economy? Sorry about that. We would like someone to get some water. But how have we done with managing the economy, the COVID-19 pandemic that ravaged world economies? Some countries, not even as big as bigger than Nigeria, were down economically.
Well, Nigeria hasn't done badly in terms of managing the after effect of COVID-19. We saw a situation where almost everything that is being done came to a halt, economically, socially, politically.
Okay, but before we continue on that, we'd like to take a short break, then return with more on this analysis of the president's speech today. Stay tuned. You're watching TVC News, of course. The executive editor, excuse me, TVC News is still here with me. And we're talking, before we went on the break, we're talking about the impact of COVID-19 and how Nigeria has been able to manage this and still standing strong economically.
Nigeria, just to rehash a little bit of what I said earlier, Nigeria didn't do badly, hasn't done badly in managing COVID-19. It came at a time and held the whole world, to the ground. Economically, politically, socially, everything came to a standstill. Some parts of the world are still dealing with it. The third wave, the fourth wave, and all of that. Even as we speak, the Nigeria authorities, had been consistent with the message of staying safe, the message of letting people know that we are not isolated from the rest of the world. We cannot be isolated from the rest of the world at a time like this. So people need to be careful. When the campaign for vaccine, got to the height, Nigeria also got its own share, or some, to
from the COVAX.
Yes, to go through, to cover a percentage of the population. Has it gone far? I do not think so. There's still a lot of ground to cover, but at least the process is ongoing. That's just it. Unfortunately, among the people, there's a poor understanding of what the issue is.
And why is that the issue?
I wouldn't be able to, put a finger at it, because it's not because government is not talking, or the agencies are not talking. It's not because media houses are not doing their job by, disseminating information. It is not as a result of lack of policy. No, but maybe that nonchalant approach.
The government has blamed disinformation and fake news as one of the causes.
It may not be right. It may not really be right, because if fake news is, pushing a narrative in a particular direction, what has the non-fake news done?
Okay.
The non-fake news had remained, stable and focused in pushing out the correct information. But the people themselves, perhaps because the people are used to believing what they see. So they've not started seeing dead bodies littered all over the place. So it's still something that they could afford to joke with. Remember, the early period when the coronavirus was reported in Nigeria, anybody will tell, be careful. The question they will ask you is, have you seen anyone? Tell me if you have seen anyone that, came down with the ailment. Whereas the isolation wards were filled up, but people keep saying that there was no one, until it spread and almost everyone had had a fair, an experience of who had gone down with the ailment or the infection. And so that's no longer the, word on the street now.
Okay.
But has people taken it seriously? It's not clear. But all the same, we are not doing badly.
All right, so far, the administration changed the Democracy Day from May 29th to June the 12th. Now, how has this resonated amongst the people, amongst Nigerians so far?
It was received with, the ovation was loud.
Okay.
When that was done.
Because the agitation has been on for quite a while.
Exactly.
At the point, the Southwest states were only commemorating the day.
Some of the Southwest states were the ones that were, recognized. It wasn't a national day. But when this pronouncement was made in 2018, it resonated across the length and breadth of the country in recognition of the sacrifices. June 12 is not just about MKO Abiola. It's about the election that has been adjudged the freest and the fairest in the country. So if we did it before, we can do it again. That's what one of the significance of June 12. If we have done it before by having a free and fair election, it means we can do it again. Now, the president spoke today about his commitment to ensuring that there is a free and fair election.
Yeah.
He may be committed, yes, but there are steps that need to be taken to be sure that his commitment is really his commitment. For instance, ensuring that the electoral umpire are made up of people that has, of credible character and non-partisan people. Because when you have partisan people make up the electoral umpire, it has already begun to put up the umpire up for scrutiny and criticism. Whether the actions are correct, whether the actions are right, it will be perceived. It is about perception now. It will be perceived that, yes, because Mr. A is loyal to this other person, most of his or her decision wouldn't be in the interest of these other people. It will protect this. It is something that the government will need to pay attention to. And having free and fair election also lie in the hands of the politicians. because it is the desperate politician that develop how to manipulate the process.
What about the people?
That's it. It's a chain. It's a desperate politicians that develop how to manipulate the process by bribing, by bringing in thugs, by doing all of that is the interest of the politician. Now, for the people themselves, it lies in their hands also to ensure that they are not influenced, because when you are influenced to vote in a particular way or for a particular party, you are signing up for whatever the party does or will do if it finds itself in power. So it's a responsibility that belongs to everyone, not just the president. The president has expressed his commitment, but every Nigerian should take that responsibility. Again, there are many people out there who write on the social media, who comment, who speak everywhere, but they are not eligible to vote because they are not registered to vote. So to be involved in it means that you get ready so that once INEC begins the renewal or revalidation of the register, you'll be able to register and get ready to vote.
All right, Executive Editor, TVC News, Uzonna Ononye, thank you very much for talking to us at this point. Of course, the President mentioned key areas in his speech. He talked about the war against insecurity, economic growth, poverty reduction and job creation, sustenance of democracy, the call for constitutional review, agriculture, which is a key point in this administration's agenda. Then he talked about the women and youths' participation in the growth of the country. Thank you very much for joining us at this point.